Hi, everybody. Welcome to the fourth and the final episode in our series where we've been exploring the environmental ESRSs with our technical experts here at SLR. Which I can't believe how quick those last 4 weeks have flown. It's absolutely crazy. Anyway, I'm Rosanna. I'm the ESG Reporting Lead and CSRD expert here at SLR, and I'm here today with Bonya Lung. Bonya, would you mind just briefly introducing yourself, please?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Bonya, and I am a principal consultant here at SLR. My background's in waste management and circular economies, and today I'm going to talk a bit about the ESRS E5 on resource use and circular economy.
Cool. So the next slide, please, Diana. I know a lot of you have joined for the whole series and you probably know this intro like off by heart by now. So I'll try and keep this short and sweet, but really quickly, just to avoid feedback, you've all been popped on mute. And if you want to ask any questions, feel free to use the question box on the right. And we are hoping to have a bit of wiggle room at the end to answer any questions that you have. On the next slide, for those of you who haven't joined the previous episodes, we're SLR Consulting. We're a global sustainability company with the full spectrum of services from strategic to technical advisory. And we drive the shift to sustainability through our 6 sustainability solutions, which are outlined on the right. And our sustainability solutions can be mapped to the ESRSs to support you through your full CSRD journey. So whether it's waste and circularity or DE&I, responsible sourcing or supply chain due diligence. Now, these sustainability solutions are all underpinned by our technical disciplines, from safety advisory to water and wastewater engineering, air quality, hydrology, ecology. So when it comes to the implementation of your plans, our technical experts and our engineers will be there to put those plans into action. If you'd like a more detailed intro to CSRD, you can find webinars on our website. But by way of a very quick introduction, CSRD stands for the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, and it's central to the execution of the EU's Green Deal. Basically, the long and short of it is that if companies are being transparent and they're disclosing on their ESG related impacts, risks and opportunities and the strategies to manage these, then we'll expect to see capital directed into sustainable solutions. So the directive is being rolled out between 2024 and 2028. It's impacting around 50,000 companies directly, but many more companies will be indirectly affected as those in-scope organizations will begin to collect data from non-in-scope companies within the value chain. Now, while there's a lot of uncertainty at the moment about what might be the repercussions if companies aren't complying with the regulation, at SLR, we're really encouraging companies to see the opportunities of that CSRD presents. So it can really drive kind of meaningful stakeholder engagement, as well as pushing the sustainability agenda at all levels of your organization. So while on the surface, it may seem like a reporting burden, it's actually a great strategic opportunity to set targets, create plans, and to also build the corresponding case for resource allocation. CSRD, on the next slide, please, Diana, is being mandated through the ESRSs, which are the European Sustainability Reporting Standards, and they comprise of 12 papers currently. So ESRS 1 kind of serves as the rule book. There's no disclosures associated with this. ESRS 2 is mandatory for all companies. And then the topical standards are mandatory for disclosure if you define the topic as material through your double materiality assessment. The only nuance there is that for ESRS E1, which is climate change, if you don't define it as material, so you define it as immaterial, you have to disclose how climate change is not material to your organization. Now, the sector agnostic and the non-EU parent standards are being rolled out from 2026. But if you're disclosing in line with best practice, you should already be identifying sector and entity specific impacts, risks and opportunities anyway. So this delay will not impact when or what you're reporting. Next slide, please, Diana. We suggest a 4-step process in preparing for CSRD disclosures, kicking off with a double materiality assessment before conducting a gap analysis on your material areas. And then the majority of the work will sit in actually addressing those gaps before you move on to disclosing. Now, if you're interested in learning a bit more about the kind of top line CSRD requirements, or how to conduct a double materiality assessment, or how to bake your DMA into your enterprise risk management process in future reporting cycles, then head over to our website where you can find webinars on these topics. Now on the next slide, please, Diana. What is crucial is that you have technical input throughout this full process. So it's firstly important right at the beginning of the process where you're identifying and scoring your impacts, risks, and opportunities. And in this step, you may be engaging in things like scenario analysis. So having that technical input is crucial. It's also critical that you get your technical input when addressing your disclosure gaps. So I've broken that down into 3 steps, just to simplify things. Firstly, it's critical that you build a solid baseline of your material areas, which includes ensuring that you have really high quality data collection and management systems in place. You then move on to the modeling targets to minimize your negative impacts. And you then want to be creating strategies and policies to manage your IROs, impacts, risks, and opportunities, such as kind of risk mitigation strategies or action plans to monitor and manage your negative and positive impacts before moving on to implementing those plans and then disclosing annually on your progress. Now, what we're finding on the next slide, thanks, Diana, what we're finding through supporting companies in this process is that it's not uncommon that companies are at really varying stages of readiness. And that's both in terms of preparing for their double materiality, but also across the different ESRSs. So in the last 3 webinars, we focused the attention on where we think is going to be most useful for most companies. So for climate change, we focused on scenario analysis and quantification. For water, we were thinking about target setting and data collection and a bit on risk identification. Last week on biodiversity, we really took it back to square one, thinking about identifying impacts, risks, and opportunities within the value chain. And today we're focusing on the final one, resource use and circular economy. Now, what we're finding is it's a bit of a mixed bag here, with some maybe more developed thinking around waste within own operations, and then some hotspots of understanding through LCAs. Now, while our webinars will focus on the bits that we believe will be most useful, what's crucial is that you tailor your CSRD action plan to where you currently are on your journey. So every process will be different for every company. So if you do have any specific questions, don't hesitate to reach out via email, either to myself or to our technical experts, and we can answer your questions directly. So turning our attention to ESRS E5, Bonya, I think you're going to start with a bit of an overview of what's expected to be disclosed before walking through some kind of practical steps of what companies can be doing to prepare, I think. Over to you, Bonya.
Great, thank you, Rosanna. It's a really exciting time for the resource use and circular economy space because it is pretty much the first time that this topic is incorporated in a legislative reporting requirements, while previous reporting guidelines have always been voluntary and they are a little bit fragmented. So this is a really exciting period where we can actually see a legislative approach to what is required for reporting on resource use and circular economy. And today we're going to talk through all the major requirements within this ESRS E5 chapter on how do we identify any impact risks and opportunities, and also looking into where we can find metrics and targets within an organization. So this is so much more than just reporting on your waste generation, because there's a element of resource use in there where the CSRD requirements want companies to disclose on the material input as well. So next slide, please. Can we go to the next slide, please? Up the previous slide. Up one more slide, please. Oh, if you go to the typical value chain slide.
Yeah, go
Yes,
for it.
perfect. Thank you. So, taking a step back, so what does it actually mean by a value chain? So this is a very typical, very simplified version of what a material supply, a value chain looks like. So there's a raw material stage, and then it goes into manufacturing or operation, and then it goes into distribution and consumer use and post-consumer treatment. So this is very much mimicking what a life cycle assessment sort of would look like in terms of the thinking of the impact of a product or process to the environment. So actually companies most of the time will have some waste management data of their own operation within the manufacturing or operation stage, but there are still questions to be asked about the integrity and reliability of those data. And most importantly, with this ESRS E5 section, it requires the reporting of resource inflow and resource outflow, which includes the products and also waste. So it really encapsulating all of these stages within a product or process life cycle on the raw material and consumer and post-consumer stages. And the the standards also requires the reporting of any circular product design and circular material use rate, renewable resources, etc. So this really covers a whole lot of different material usage within your own value chain and understanding the transparent use of your material through the different stages of your product lifecycle or your process lifecycle. So if we go to the next slide. So there are 6 key requirements in the ESRS E5 on resource use and circular economy. And this is what we suggest companies should go in the order of implementing these requirements in your own organization. So we would suggest starting with resource outflows, which is essentially your products and your waste management data, and then going into your resource inflows, where your procurement of material into your own supply chain, and then quantifying the financial effects of your circular management system, any policies to formalize all of the actions that you're going to do, and setting targets, and last but not least, formalizing all the actions and resources is required for the ESRS E5. So next slide, please. So when it comes to the resource outflow and waste, there are requirements on both sides, on the product lifecycle and also on the waste management data. On the product side, ESRS E5 requires companies to report on the product and packaging that enters into market, including their durability, reusability, and repairability. So these are all elements that companies will have to start reporting that were not necessarily suggested in previous legislation or reporting guidelines as much. And there's also a encouragement to ask companies to report on the product end of life management. So if a product is being subject to extended producer responsibility schemes, or your company has established your own take back schemes, these are also very much encouraged to be reported in the in your sustainability reporting under the ESRS E5 chapter. And also, obviously, when we talk about waste and circularity, there's obviously going to be an element of asking company to report on their waste management data, including your reuse, your recycling, recovery, disposal, and also the composition of your hazardous waste. And it goes into a lot of details of what kind of waste you're producing and also your treatment methods, so that it is all transparent to your stakeholders. Next slide, please. When it comes to resource inflows, this is something that companies are less familiar with in terms of their reporting. So this is talking about the weight of materials that is flowing in during the reporting period, including technical and biological materials. And by technical materials, I'm referring to your metals, your materials that are going through the technical cycle, and with biological material, it mostly refers to materials that would be entering the biological cycle, such as your grass and soil and all of the material that can be grown out of the ground or that is produced through nature. And one really important thing that we need to note here is that the reporting requirements ask companies to report everything using the unit of weight. And this is the units that we've always used for circularity. And this is the first time that has been formalized in the legislation where the inflow of material needs to be recorded in weight and reported in weight. And this is something that often sits in the procurement department, but most of the time companies will either have the information of their material inflows recorded in either volume, quantity, or monetary value, whilst weight is not very seen very often. So this is something that company really need to get their attention on to provide that piece of data. And in terms of resource inflow, there's also other things that come the requirements asked for, such as the recycled content, the renewable content, any material that is sustainably sourced, including their certification schemes used, and also any methodology used to calculate the data on the resource inflow. So there's lots of actions here for company to look into, not just their waste management side of material management, but the procurement side of material management as well. Next slide, please. Oh, yeah. So when it comes to the anticipated financial effects, basically quantifying what the actions will be for your companies to go into a more circular economy. And there are two main things that are needing to be reported in this section. The first one is the anticipated financial effects due to risk arising from material resource use and circular economy related impacts and dependencies. And the other one is the anticipated financial effects due to opportunities related to resource use and circular economy. So here I've got three examples of what are these risks associated with your resource use and circular economy that is applicable to a lot of companies that will be subject to a report on ESRS E5. So the first one is critical materials, where there are lots of critical minerals, particularly in our electronic products. And if your company is producing any of the products that relies on any of the critical materials, then it's probably a big risk for you to look into it and try to quantify it in a financial sense. And another example is your depleting resources, such as oil. And if your company is relying on plastic quite a lot, then there could be a risk of you, there could be a financial risk of you having a raw material that is going to increase in prices in the long term, and you'll want to report that as well. And the last one is a bit further away from the material itself, is compliance fee. So this is very applicable to companies that have products that are subject to extended producer responsibility schemes. We now have EPR for packaging, batteries, and waste electronic and electrical equipment, but there's going to be a huge wave of EPR that is going to cover on textile as well. So your compliance fee on your products is going to be a big financial have a big financial impact on your resource use and circular economy, and this is something that should be reported within this section as well. So the next slide, please. Yep. So when it comes to the policy and actions, so we've collected the data on your resource inflow and resource outflow, all these data is going to inform the policies and actions on your resource use and circular economy agenda. And the ESRS has kindly provided some suggestion on what you can do in terms of your circular economy, such as transitioning away from virgin resources, increasing use of secondary and recycled material, sustainable sourcing, use of renewable resources, trying to increase resource efficiencies, particularly on critical raw material and rare earths, application of circular design and products, implementation of circular business models, and also waste prevention in the upstream and downstream of your value chain. So I've got some examples here on what different industry can do to implement some of these ideas of transitioning into a circular business model. So the first one is the product as a service. So this is probably quite a common way of companies providing their product, but in a servitized format. So a really good example is printers in offices or corporate offices. So what you want is not necessary as a customer, you don't necessarily want a printer. You want the printing, the things that is being printed out through the printer. So a lot of printing companies actually are providing the printer as a service. So as a customer, you pay a fee and the printing company will come in and provide you with a printer. They handle all of the maintenance, any faulty problems. And when it comes to the printer's end of life, the printing company will take the printer away and replace it with a new or another functioning printer that provides the same function. So this is thinking about how do you transform your business model so that you're still delivering the same value, same service to your client, but through a different way of managing your manufacturing quantity and also your product. Another way of doing it is to rethink your packaging. So this is very much realized in our retail space where there are bulk buy options compared to individually packaged material or products to reduce the packaging. So this is thinking about how to present your products to your customer in a different way to minimize the material footprint that you have throughout the value chain. Another really good example is the sharing economy. So most people nowadays probably won't have a tux within their wardrobe, but we can rent these occasional wears through different companies where they can have one piece of garment and be reused multiple times for different clients and still generate the revenue on the number of use of the product. And some other examples such as Airbnb and Uber are really good examples of the sharing economy as well. And there's one examples that really resonate with me is the use of renovation equipment, such as things like a drill or a saw, where you don't necessarily use that saw very often or the drill very often throughout its lifetime. So it's probably easier to rent it from somewhere else to make it more economically efficient for both the customer and also your own company. And another way of introducing circular thinking into your product design is to implement modular design. So think about a car. If your brake light is broken, you don't immediately replace the entire car. You go and have it fixed and replace that part that is broken. So encouraging more modular design within your product would be a good way to implement some circular design in your value chain, and also think about how do we offer repairing service to our customers. Next slide, please. So the last thing that we're going to talk about is the targets related to resource use and circular economy. There are, once we have collected all the data and also all the actions and resources that is needed, we're going to set targets for what to come. And here are some examples of the targets that is suggested by the ESRS, including increasing circular product design, increasing circular material use, minimizing primary raw material, sustainable sourcing of use of renewable resources, and also the level of preparation for proper treatment of your waste. And it was required in the ESRS that companies should relate how the targets relate to the waste hierarchy, which is on the right-hand side. So when we think about the targets, don't just think about how do we manage the waste better, try to think one step above or two steps above in the waste hierarchy, where we want to rethink, redesign, and reduce our waste generation at the first place before we go down the waste hierarchy. And last but not least, next slide, please. Just to summarize what we've talked about today, we've covered a lot on this ESRS E5 chapter. We talked about resource outflow and inflows, and the key steps to it is to try to collect data and implement those strategies to collect the data from your relevant stakeholders. And then we're going to quantify the financial effects of your risk and opportunities, any policies to address the risks and opportunities and align them with your targets. We're going to set targets and also allocate resource and actions that will help achieve the targets. So in terms of the financial effects, just a reminder that we have 3 years to complete the financial effects chapter. It gives us time to build a business case towards them. And with the policy, we can spell out all the roles and responsibilities. So it's a really good way to formalize your company's material management system, and also thinking about how do you transition into a more circular business model. And I think that's it from this chapter from me. You're on mute, Rosanna, I think.
Am I still on mute? Can you
There
hear
you
me?
go.
Yeah,
Yes.
nice. We don't have too long for questions. I'm going to quickly cover. Bonya, could you just quickly cover in that first step, so identifying impacts, risks, and opportunities? Maybe just if you could recap on some of the typical risks that companies face in terms of resource use and circular economy. I just had a
Yeah,
question
of
on
course. Yeah, so a really typical one would be looking into what your product or what kind of material that you're relying on, and if it's if it's a material within the biological loop, look into if there's any impact, from other topics within the ESRS that is going to impact how your material is going to be perhaps depleting, but also maybe an opportunities for you to look into reducing the reliance on those particular products that are critical to different industries, and wanting to look into how these materials can be reducing the use within your product. So I think it is a very much case-by-case basis on what exactly the material or the risk associated with each industry is going to be. But there are some top-line ones, such as critical raw material, rare earth. These are all very much very high risk, relatively high risk materials that we're looking into nowadays.
Cool. Thanks, Bonya. And then just quickly want to touch on, we've just had a question on someone being curious about the order that we've, the reasoning behind the order of the disclosures. So we've just talked through it in that way, and we did do in the previous webinars as well, just because we felt as though, so all of these things have to be disclosed ideally in your first disclosure. However, there's the transitional period for financial quantification. We did it in this way because E5.5 and E5.4 are related to the kind of data collection. And we think in terms of how companies think about this in their process, actually having that data, step one, is really important. We then think in terms of policies, making sure that it's clear the governance structure that sits behind who's managing this, the roles and responsibilities associated with the particular topic is important, so that then you have the right people in the room to set your targets. And then once you've set your targets, you'll be able to develop your actions and the resources that you'll have allocated to meet those targets. So there's no need for you to follow it this way. We just thought for the sake of the webinar, it's quite a pragmatic and logical way to just talk through it. That's why we did it in that order.
Yeah.
We don't have time for any more questions. We're at past. I just want to thank everybody for joining the series. We've had lots of engagement, lots of follow-up emails after the webinars, and I think people have really benefited from deep diving into the different ESRSs. And while everyone's mind is focused on the double materiality assessment at the moment, making sure that you are thinking about what comes next and being familiar with what you may need to disclose is important. So thank you all so much, and do keep your eyes open. We're running a series of webinars on raters and rankers in a few weeks' time, so head over to our website if you're keen to sign up for those. Thanks everybody. Bye.
Thank you.